What's up guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Paul Claremont. This is video number 2 in my Qabalah series. So if you haven't seen the first one or you don't know what Qabalah is, you should probably go check that out first. In today's video, which has been much overdue, I'm going to explain another theme on the Tree of Life I didn't get into last time. The 3 pillars and how the concept of polarity, positive and negative or masculine and feminine forces, operate on the Tree of Life. Let's do it. As I was explaining in the first video, there's several ways to categorize the 10 Sephiroth that helps reveal their meaning and relationships more clearly. But I only explained one of them, called the 3 Trinities, just to introduce you guys to their names, basic qualities, and show you that they form functional units. We have the supernal triangle, the ethical triangle, and the astral triangle, with Malkut at the bottom by itself. If you remember, when I described the supernal triad of Keter, Chokmah, and Binah at the top of the tree, I explained them in terms of polarity to help clarify their significance, with Keter as neutral, Chokmah as a positive polarity, and Binah as a negative. I bring this up again because this pattern of switching back and forth between equilibrium, positive and negative, continues the whole way down the tree. So the next major categorization to know is the 3 pillars. We have the pillar of mercy on the right, mildness in the middle, and severity on the left. And so the right column corresponds to positive polarity, then equilibrium in the middle, and negative on the left. These are like the 2 pillars of Solomon's temple in the High Priestess card, Boaz and Yakin, where the priestess herself is the middle column. You might realize we can also relate this to Yin, Yang, and Tao, as well as the 3 main auric lines in Hinduism called Ida, Pingala, and Sushumna. And when viewing the tree at the human level, you visualize it as if you're looking at yourself in the mirror, where your right arm is actually on the left side of the tree. And so the polarities of the Sephiroth oscillate back and forth like a sinusoidal wave, alternating current, photons, or pretty much everything in physics, as you follow the lightning flash down the tree. So what's the point of talking about polarity other than demonstrating that Qabalah incorporates natural rhythms? In the same way that when we say masculine and feminine, we have associated stereotypical qualities that come to mind, the same applies to this basic terminology of positive and negative. They just signify certain energetic tendencies. Like when you look at a wave on the ocean, there's a part of it that goes up, the peak, and a part that caves in, the trough. They're just different styles or modes of expression. By classifying the tree into 3 pillars, it shows us that the same underlying energetic trend permeates each of these columns as you move down the tree. And based on which Sephiroth you're in, the concept of polarity is going to manifest differently, beyond just the vague beginner idea of positive and negative, as I'll show throughout the video. In general, the Sephiroth in the right column are considered different levels of force, just like how Chokmah is pure kinetic outflowing energy. The left column pertains to form, like how Binah is the fundamental coalescing tendency that eventually makes physical form possible in Malkut. And the middle pillar is states of consciousness, which I hinted at in part 1. Sensory consciousness in Malkut, the subconscious in Yesod, Christ consciousness in Tiferet, and union with God in Keter. The rationale for this is explained by Dion Fortune's comment. Consciousness descends plane by plane, and only begins to manifest when the polarizing Sephiroth are in equilibrium. Therefore, the modes of consciousness are assigned to the equilibrating Sephiroth upon the middle pillar, but the magical powers are assigned to the opposing Sephiroth. Again, I'll get into the magical application of Qabalah at a later time. Let's give some examples for how to logically view these 2 columns as force and form. Though at the end of the day, I consider all the Sephiroth as different types of forces. The next triangle below the supernal triad is the ethical triangle of Chesed, Geburah, and Tiferet. Since Chesed, the sphere of mercy or love, is in the right column, this lets us know that we should investigate it as a force of some kind. Whereas Chokmah above it was just pure outflowing creative force, this is a constructive force, an organizing force, one that builds and preserves harmonious structures. Think of those cymatics experiments David Wilcock likes to talk about, where a frequency is run beneath a pile of sand and it begins to form organized geometries, just like how water crystallizes into a geometric snowflake. It's insightful to point out, though, that not every frequency succeeds. only specific quantized vibrations are going to yield the most pleasing structures, depending on what materials you're working with. Appropriately, Chesed is symbolized by Jupiter, the god Zeus, and a king on his throne with a scepter and an orb in his left hand, with the idea that a good ruler is going to bring organization and efficiency to his kingdom through the creation of good laws and intelligent infrastructures. The skillful king is the harmonious vibration or unifying current. And I want to include an interesting diversion here. A few years ago, when it came out in the news that a new Da Vinci painting called the Salvator Mundi was discovered and sold for record price, I was absolutely blown away because it was a painting of Jesus of Nazareth holding a glass orb in his left hand, which told me a few things. Number one, Da Vinci was likely secretly aware of esoteric teachings like the Qabalah, which shouldn't be too surprising based on his works. Number two, he was trying to tell the observer that Jesus was also initiated in these studies, because don't forget, Jesus was Jewish and Qabalah is the esoteric soul of the religion. And number three, Da Vinci was also indicating, of course, that Jesus' role was like Chesed. He was building a new strong kingdom in the minds of that generation, helping them to see the brightness of life and God in the midst of an oppressive Roman Empire. Surprisingly, a new article about this suddenly appeared while I was writing this video, years after I learned about this. Anyway, now let's go to the left side of the tree with Geburah, severity or justice. It's in the form pillar, so we know it has something to do with the theme of coalescing and inertia that Binah shows us. Whereas Chesed was the wise king ruling in his throne, Geburah is the warrior king in his chariot equipped with a sword. This is the important force that breaks things down, as symbolized by the planet Mars, the Roman god of war. It's a corrective. It eliminates that which is harmful, no longer belongs, or serves a positive purpose. Also, like fire, it can transmute things in service of a greater good, like the energy you sacrifice towards your goal of building muscle, becoming an athlete, or building a business. That's why its archangel, Kamael, is called the burner of God. It can be the fire that immolates evil to serve justice, and the fire that sacrifices inputs for a greater purpose. But to view Geburah in the same theme as the negative polarity, think of gravity, how although it's responsible for allowing matter to form in the first place, over time or through increased intensity, it decomposes structures, it makes them crumble and break down. So you can think of Saturn, Binah, as the passive destroyer, because it solidifies and entraps free-flowing force into form, and Mars, Geburah, as the active destroyer, Shiva, who breaks down those created forms. And forms can be anything, not just objects, but things like ideas, attitudes, and paradigms. You might have noticed, when viewing the Sephiroth through this terminology of masculine and feminine, that they don't always match up with this designation at a surface level. In fact, like the last examples, there seems to be an energetic switchover after the abyss, where the positive side starts seeming more feminine and the negative side starts seeming masculine as we think of it. I personally rationalize this by thinking about the main nadis I mentioned, Ida and Pingala, where the prana channels actually cross over and switch sides after they pass through the third eye chakra. And also, from a definitive physiological point of view, it's like how the left side of the brain controls the right side of the body and vice versa, which is called contralateral organization. This explains why in other spiritual systems we still think of the right arm as the masculine side and the left arm as the receptive feminine side. They definitely have that surface quality to them. But perhaps their fundamental undercurrent is as the Kabbalistic pillars suggest. Anyway, from what I can see, there's 3 educational purposes for this surface level confusion. It offers you an opportunity to gain more insight about each Sephirah by investigating how it would fit under the heading of positive or negative, force or form. Number 2, it prevents you from trying to stop at the surface level of concepts and forces you to use your mind and look deeper. And number 3, it shows you that the Sephiroth aren't one-dimensional. There's many levels to each one, like a tower, which I'll explain in the next video. And there's always a crossover of polarity within each. Each one has its own internal polarity of positive and negative, like the poles of a magnet, or in fact like people, where we all contain different blends of both masculine and feminine energies. As a stellar example, the Hod Netzach, victory or firmness, associated with the goddess Aphrodite and the planet Venus, is literally symbolized by a woman. So you would think you would find it in the left feminine pillar, not the right. What this shows is to be mindful of the more general idea of polarity and not get caught up in the worldly concepts of masculine and feminine, which are just specialized versions of the two polarities. For the sake of completeness, since I'm sure you're curious, I'll briefly show how polarity also manifests in the Sephiroth, Hod, and Netzach. I think of Netzach as the nebulous force of emotions, or the forces in nature, and by contrast, Hod as the tangible thoughts of the intellect, or the specific designs behind all forms in the world, how they'll interact with forces. One is dynamic and the other is concrete. So once again, like Chesed and Geburah, you can see how these themes are a lower reflection or shadow of the supernals above them. And perhaps you can understand it easier by remembering the supernals titles like I explained in part 1. Netzach corresponding to wisdom, which exerts an expansive, knowing influence but is non-specific, and Hod a reflection of understanding, when the mind grabs hold of wisdom for its own comprehension. Last, there's a few things I want to mention before we get into part 3 of this series about the 4 Kabbalistic worlds. The polarity found in the 3 pillars is what I would call relative polarity, the preferred surface level tendencies of the Sephiroth. And then, like I mentioned, the Sephiroth also have a second internal dual polarity, like magnetic poles. They're all complete within themselves by design, no matter what their surface qualities are emphasizing. By inference, you can see how these 2 principles apply to people as well. We all have the divine source within us, no matter what character we're playing. Next, on the subject of balance, it's important to know that the Sephiroth are harmonious when they work in line with their natural environment and capability, their dharma, so to speak. And if they're trying to do some other job they're not designed for, that's when imbalance occurs. Once again, we can apply this principle to our own psychology. It's like those times when you find yourself too focused on helping and fixing other people's problems, maybe because you've gained the wisdom and ability to do so, but you forget to maintain your own inner framework of sovereignty in the process. It doesn't go well because people feel your imbalance. They feel like you're needing them to change instead of just offering them judgment-free advice. For the Sephiroth, an example would be when mercy, Chesed, turns into weakness, where out of timidity or fear of imposing boundaries, you allow something negative or counterproductive to remain in your life. Or when severity, Geburah, turns from practical, ego-free justice and defense of what is good into senseless violence and desire to destroy. So there you have it, guys. This was episode 2 in my Qabalah series. Now you know the significance of the 3 pillars on the Tree of Life, and some examples of how polarity manifests in the Sephiroth as we travel down the tree. If you liked this video, let me know by hitting the like button. And be sure to subscribe to my channel for more esoteric and spiritual content. Also, if you liked the cool chakra poster I used in this video, be sure to check out Doing Good Art in the description below. I've linked Adrian's Instagram and website where he sells full-size posters of spiritual-themed art like that. This was Paul Claremont. I'll see you guys next time. Peace.